Okay, so I'd like to have a questions, I'd like to have a gutsy student to ask the, top scholars, from the all over the world. And do you have any questions? Yeah, please.
I'm a freshman of Faculty of Economics. I have a question about health expenditure. I think payment system for medical service should be reformed to cut down health expenditure. For example, the government introduced high self-pay ratio for simple disease or injury. But I have nothing. I know nothing about payment system. So, how effective reforming payment system?
Maybe could you respond first?
It's a quite interesting question, and yes, payment system has an effect on how large the health expenditure will be, and there are many discussions on reforms of payment system. And some research shows, yes, the reform in the payment system is effective in reducing the health expenditures. But this is my impression. My impression is that such a reform is effective in the reduce in the health expenditures, but the magnitude of the effect is quite small compared to the expenditure growth due to aging or technological progress. And at the same time, that the reform in the health payment system often faces how to say political battle between government and maybe health workers, and so it is quite difficult to introduce new payment system to cut down the health expenditures. I hope this is an answer for you.
Yeah. Do you want to join? Because there's a significant difference between Japan and the United States. So if you could answer those kind of things, that would be great, Tony.
Well, let me say first, I didn't have time to talk about this, but the paper that I mentioned today and the results that were described in that paper finds that the reform that works best in terms of correcting the fiscal imbalances is higher co-payments, which is what you're talking about, for, in particular, older retirees. And there's a large body of research, it's relatively recent in the United States, that is able to account for a lot of puzzles. It turns out that people hold wealth very late in their life in the United States. And the question is, why do they do that? I think there's an emerging consensus now in the United States that the reason, or an important reason for that, is the risk of high medical expenditures, long-term care expenditures late in life. And so the model that I presented today actually has that property. The risks, an important life risk you face, is living to a very old age, and at the same time, because you're old, having been exposed to very high risk of large medical expenditures. And so, I'll just mention a few papers. Probably the most important paper is Denardi, French, and Jones that's made this case. And the other paper is by a co-author of mine. It's Kopecki and Koroshkova. Ipe asked me to talk about U.S. policies, and here, well, long-term care insurance for retirees in Japan is very different as compared to the United States. The United States has a smaller program because it's means tested. The only people who benefit from public coverage of long-term care expenses are those who are very poor. In Japan, there's an entitlement layer that every retiree gets. You get a certain number of points. If your expenditures exceed the threshold, then you get no coverage. And then if they're really high, you get complete coverage. So it's a very different system, but it's quite conceivable that what we find for the United States in my research is this parsimonious, very small means-tested program first provides valuable coverage, and it's also cheap to provide. It's much cheaper as this pay-as-you-go system that we have in Japan.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is that okay? Yeah. Do you have any question? Yeah, please, Hayakawa-san. Obviously, you are not undergraduate, but you are welcome.
My age is almost triple of undergraduates. But anyway, all of you expressed serious concern about the sustainability of Japan's budget, government budget. But on the other hand, as Professor Brown pointed out, it's very difficult to predict when the fiscal crisis comes. It's something like predicting the earthquake. We almost know that the earthquake will come in someday, but nobody knows when it actually comes. But now we can think of very visible candidate for the trigger of the crisis. I mean the end of QQE. Just think of that. Just imagine that 2% inflation be achieved within a couple of years from now, while consumption tax rate remain 8%, and we have a very huge fiscal deficit. And if Bank of Japan stop buying, 10 trillion yen per month JGB, what happens? After when the actually 2% inflation will be achieved. Do you think this can be a candidate for trigger or not?
I work for the Federal Reserve System, and so I have to put on my hat as the monetary economist now, because I think this is really a question about monetary economics. And before I say anything, these are my own personal views and not those of the Federal Reserve System. And having said that, let me say that some people I know are not concerned about this risk at all. The United States faces the same risk. There's a huge balance sheet, and we've kind of seen that we've stopped purchasing. But there's a question about, isn't that big balance sheet going to come back and cause problems moving forward? And the answer is an acronym, IOER, interest rate on excess reserves. Now, the Bank of Japan has said nothing about how exit will occur once they hit 2%. But my guess is, given the composition of the balance sheet now, there's lots of long-term debt on the balance sheet, that they're going to choose not to sell that, because just for the reasons that you said, that will push down the prices, raise the yields, and could create a sudden sharp change in the yield curve. And so my guess is that as we move towards exit, that we're going to see them providing the basis to offer interest on excess reserves, which allows them, in principle, to sterilize the size of the balance sheet. So that hasn't, as far as I haven't heard any discussion of this yet, but that would be my best guess, is about how they'll avoid the scenario you described.
Let me just add one comment. Now that you've heard the official U.S. Fed's view, I think, in other words, the Fed seems to be in it for the long haul. They'll hold until duration of those assets whenever they expire. And along the way, there will be some losses, and the taxpayer will cut the check. So I think that's what's expected. Anything else will be very disruptive. And everybody, the market participants understand this. So this used to be a concern a few years ago. Now that the Fed has clearly stated what their policy is, everybody is completely, I think, in agreement.
Keiichiro, would you like to join?
No, only one comment. So there's nothing to add, but maybe it takes much more years to achieve the 2% target. So maybe you...
People believe that, but I think that it's quite possible that 2% be achieved within not a year, a couple of years.
Okay, so that's interesting. So first, Kitamura-san, please.
Okay. I think for views argument is more or less I agree with that. So I don't have any objections or any questions, but I think Keio longevity initiatives wanted to celebrate the Japanese elderly lived up late 80s with relatively healthy conditions. That should be something, remarkable historical experience. And no other country experienced such a huge number of people live up until the 80s or 90s. Why can't you celebrate or adding some positive information on that?
Yeah.
No. In our models, we don't have a quality of life variable. And therefore, anybody who's 20 or 25 or 50 or 90 years old and alive is equally happy. So in our models, at least, we certainly celebrate life until however long it may last. I see your point. So I think one place where that may play a role is if one were to model a household with an extended household, with like 2-3 generations under the same roof, and therefore providing some benefits, or either could be childcare, some home production, or possibly some complementarities in leisure that would enhance happiness. But we are not there yet.
This is a question for all of you. So
yeah. Well, let me be honest about the model. The agents in the model, actually, there's a sense in which the utility is higher if they die earlier. A long life, because if you have a certain amount of lifetime earnings and you die earlier, then you're dividing up over a shorter number of periods, and so I think you're gonna get, kind of all things considered, higher utility with a lower survival probabilities.
Without on leisure.
Yeah. So there might be some way to fix it, but no, I think everybody recognizes that these terrific changes that Japan has undergone in a whole range of ways, and certainly the fact that there is longevity and healthy longevity is at a low cost. Japan has been able to avoid this common problem that we see in other industrialized economies, where medical expenditures are growing much more rapidly than the rate of growth of the economy. And so these are remarkable accomplishments that are certainly something to be very proud of, and I think what we're just trying to do is raise some red flags about the future and try to produce a discussion about paths forward.
Okay. So we are not saying that the elderly should die early, but you know, what we are saying that this fiscal situation right now in Japan is represents or shows that there is the burden sharing between the elderly generation and the young generation is not fair. So we need to make, or we need to construct some kind of a little bit more fair system, fair burden sharing between generations. So that is a topic, that is an agenda what we are now facing, and the politicians cannot do very well. So it is a problem of fairness, not a problem of longevity or something like that. Okay.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And living longer or even to infinity is a dream of mankind. So, and many kings search for a medicine, magical medicine to live longer in infinity. So it's a great thing to live such a long life in Japan. But if the situation continues, we have to live the poor old life. So we have to do something to avoid such a terrible situation. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. So Ueda-san, you're eager to ask the question. Okay, so right.
I'm not eager to ask a question. I'm actually trying to comment on two questions. One for Hayakawa-san. I would think even if BOJ or if we have an inflation target reach 2%, then of course we could have another target of 4% or 6%. So I don't think it will be a problem in that manner. And for the longevity issue, we have well, Kobayashi may remember our teacher, Nobel laureate Gary Becker's one of the latest topic he worked on is a value of life, and then he has an interesting paper, 2009 American Economic Review, essentially saying, well, it's not just Gary Becker's contribution, but it's essentially we can empirically estimate how people evaluate additional 1 year of life, and those many people are actually estimating it, and then in the United States, that number is actually $2 million US per year. That number is used by the military Pentagon people to compensate for the early deaths of the soldiers, as well as many places. And then, in essence, Gary Becker's point was, if you look at past economic growth, indeed, in 1960s to 2010 or so, or 2009 or so, many places GDP has grown a lot, but more importantly, indeed, longevity, life expectancy went up a lot, especially in developing countries, as well as in Japan too. Japan most likely went up most among OECD countries. So if you calculate on that value of life, adding to the GDP increase, that's more better measurement of the living standards of our life. And in that case, of course, we have longer life means everyone benefits, and that can be calculated in an economic way.
Thank you very much for nice comments and the explanation, nice interpretation. So do you have any questions? So far the questions are coming from the rather benefited the generations. I think not so many questions from the, yeah, okay, so I want to have a final question. Thank you.
Okay, seems to be working now. I found the idea of the inflation being a risk premium for holding money very interesting, and has been talked a lot today about Japan reaching fiscal balance and how dangerous the debt GDP ratio, the current debt GDP ratio is. However, if we look at recent developments, we see that the year in which the fiscal balance is supposed to be reached has been delayed to 2020, and also the consumption tax increase has been delayed as well. Furthermore, the third arrow of Abenomics has been proven more difficult than expected to put in practice, while the central bank has increased the pace of purchasing government bonds. So do you think that the way the situation has been developing in the last few years has actually worsened the situation given what has been discussed today? Thank you.
Let me take a stab at that. The last 2 years, the focus has been on whether the economy is in recession or not, whether we have deflation, how can we get out of deflation. In other words, the focus has always been on the very, very short-term issues in Japan. And this is not just an issue in Japan. Politicians typically have a very short optimization horizon. Now they're saying, oh, we have upper house elections in 2016, so maybe we should have some relatively positive results going into the election. The issues we're talking about right now are very fundamental, very large issues, and tackling those will take a long time and also very many aspects of all kinds of ministries. And therefore, they're very difficult politically. So I don't think anything severely damaging has been done over the last 2 years, but clearly we are not acting sufficiently in advance, given all the problems Japan has. And I just, again, this brings us back to when will there be a consensus? Maybe 4 years, 6 years from now, and say, well, there are all these aging-related issues coming up. Debt to GDP is really very high. We should maybe come up with some solution package. I don't have the answer to that. Maybe Tony has officially.
I thought I'd pass and let Kobayashi-san, who is much more familiar with domestic situation and Abenomics than I am, talk.
And the bestseller writer.
Actually, I don't know, but the situation is getting worse gradually. Gradually, it is getting worse, and I think the probability of fiscal crisis is, I think rising. But we cannot, evaluate what is the size of the probability of crisis. But the situation is very ambiguous. But because I don't know, the fiscal, the shape of the fiscal balance sheet of Japanese government is very bad and getting worse. So I think the situation is getting worse.
Okay. No unofficial view, right? Okay, the final question, please.
Thank you for the presentations. This is in addition to the previous question. Considering the current situation, and I've learned that the various policies may be implemented. So if you were to order them in terms of effectiveness and the possibility of implementing them, how would it be like? That's my question.
I take very seriously this possibility of a gradual increase in the co-payment for retirees. That's not the only solution, but that places, based on a whole range of simulations, you can see, among other things, it avoids the urgency. It gets around this urgency of having to increase the consumption tax now. You can leave it at 8% for, I think, about another 20 years before you have to do anything. And so now the model may be exaggerating somewhat the effect this will have on savings, but if it's communicated in a way and you gradually increase these co-payments, certainly my research and other people's research from other countries suggests it'll be a powerful stimulus for saving, and that could actually provide some stimulus to the economy as well. So
So again, let me add to what Tony has mentioned. The normal retirement age in the United States is 67, and longevity is much smaller than Japan. So another way of reforming pensions would be extending the normal retirement age from 65 to 67 or 68 gradually. Give people the time to accumulate their private saving. In addition, I think there's a lot of room in Japan for foreign workers, guest workers, both at the high-skilled side and also on the low-skilled side, because when you are 89 years old, you want someone to operate the subway train. You want someone to be in the factory producing goods and services. So there's some room for guest worker program in Japan. And at the same time, there's a very large amount of educated, high-skilled potential labor force participants that are staying at home, females. So again, I can see another policy by the Japanese government to open up more daycare centers so that females can produce in the market.
Do you want to join? Okay, so thank you very much. So it's been a very good discussion, but we are running out of time. So we should now stop here. So again, please join me thanking the four distinguished presenters for this discussion. Thank you very much.